Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we are diving into all things continuous glucose monitor, or I will also reference as a CGM. Specifically, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on how the Dexcom G7 CGM is going. I am currently wearing that at the time of recording, and I'm going to compare it to the Freestyle Libre CGM and some of the things I've learned along the way. So the Freestyle Libre is the CGM that I first wore. I got several different shipments of those through my Levels membership, and this started back in around 2020-ish, and now they have the Dexcom G7 that's available, and there are some nice features about that one, and the cost was the same, so I decided to switch to the Dexcom G7 and see how that goes. So I will say there are some pretty noticeable differences. I'm going to share what some of those differences are, some things just about CGMs in general, some real examples of my meals, and I've compared some readings with my glucometer at home, and I'm going to just talk about a little bit more about these tools and how they continue to help me make adjustments in my daily life. So let's get into it. Hey there, I'm Katie, and welcome to the Glucose Glow-Up Show, where I'm making blood sugar balance for non-diabetics not just important, but actually fun and approachable. I'm a girl mama, problem solver, wellness advocate, and someone who turned a deep dive into metabolic health into real-life results, like healing my insulin resistance and unlocking my fertility journey. This podcast is your backstage pass to everything I've learned and I'm still learning about glucose, longevity, how to beat your cravings, and stop feeling hangry. Why does this all matter? Because when your blood sugar's in check, everything just feels better, from your mood to your energy and overall health. Here we'll talk about glucose tracking, eating for balance, optimizing your health, fertility, navigating the healthcare system, a holistic approach to wellness, and biohacking your way to feeling amazing for years to come. I'm in the trenches right alongside you, working daily to manage my own glucose and have more energy for the things I love. So whether you're ready to kickstart your health, deepen your understanding of how food impacts your body, or just want a relatable space to learn and grow, you're in the right place. Let's get glowing. Before we dive into the comparison of the Dexcom G7 and the Freestyle Libre CGM, I want to start with the basics of what exactly is a CGM, or a continuous glucose monitor. So a CGM continuously measures your blood glucose levels throughout the day by reading the interstitial fluid, which is the fluid between your cells. So it's important to recognize that the CGM does not directly measure your blood glucose like a glucometer does, or if you would get your annual labs like a lab draw. So it's not always going to be 100% accurate. In most cases, it wouldn't be accurate compared to your glucometer or a lab draw. It's going to be close, but it's never going to be the same. Mostly because it's measuring two completely different things, and when your levels start changing, the glucometer might be ahead of what your CGM is measuring. So that's why I think of a CGM as more of a trend tool to observe how my glucose levels fluctuate throughout the day. And if I would need an exact reading, I would just double check with a glucometer. So let's compare the Freestyle Libre and the Dexcom G7, which are the two CGMs that I have experience with. Like I said, I'm currently wearing a CGM right now, the Dexcom G7 at the time of recording. This is kicking off the new year in January 2025. So let's start with the Freestyle Libre. So the Freestyle Libre, I got 2 sensors at a time through my Levels membership, and each sensor lasts 14 days each. So you get a month's worth with the 2 sensors. So it can take up to 24 hours for this CGM to calibrate. I saw it mostly within the 12-hour period that it seemed to calibrate and it was working properly. But it seems that the warm-up period does really give wonky readings. So during that calibration or warm-up period, I really didn't think much of those numbers or trends because it was really radical sometimes, like really up, really down. And I'm just sitting here not even eating anything. So I knew that it wasn't accurate yet. Eventually it evens itself out, but they say it could take a while. So like I said, mostly 12 hours is what I saw. With the Freestyle Libre, you're not going to get your levels automatically. So you are required to put your phone up to your arm where the CGM is and scan it in the app. And you need to scan your phone at least once every 8 hours. And if you don't scan the CGM, you're not going to see any levels. It's still measuring your glucose levels during that time. So the next time you scan, it's going to catch up with all the hours you missed. But if you miss scanning in the 8-hour period, you may lose some data, essentially is what that means. Applying the Freestyle Libre, you have to take the sensor, it's in a little pack, and then there's the applicator, how you like push it into your arm. So it's not really overly complicated, but I did feel like kind of awkward the first few times. I mean, maybe a little nervous. I'm like sticking this tiny little needle into my arm, but I'm going to just say I don't feel it at all. But I will say the Freestyle Libre applicator seemed sort of awkward to me. Essentially, you take the applicator and you have to line it up with the sensor pack and like click it in so that the sensor is then on the applicator. And then it's sort of just like a push up onto your arm, so you're doing a little bit of manual labor, I guess, putting the CGM on. Again, not a big deal. I didn't feel anything, but it definitely feels a little bit more awkward compared to the CGM I'm going to talk about next. On the app, there's always an app that comes with the CGMs from the manufacturer. So Freestyle Libre app. It's going to show you your readings. It's going to show you your graph like for the whole day. It doesn't allow for as much flexibility and note taking and things like the Levels app. You can add, exercise and other like notes and lifestyle factors. So I will say I think like it's made more for people that are managing diabetes. It's targeted towards them, obviously. Measuring, medications and things like that. So that would be the function of that. I mean, you need to use that app to scan your CGM, and then the data from the Freestyle Libre app gets sent to the Levels app, which is what I use. So you still need it. It's just I don't take advantage of the full functionality of the manufacturer's app. One downside that I've noticed about the Freestyle Libre that maybe is significant to note is I found that the readings are often 20 to even 30 milligrams per deciliter off compared to my glucometer. So that to me feels pretty significant if you are kind of looking at those numbers. Like if you would wake up with a fasting glucose that was at 99, but really it's at like 85, to me that feels pretty different and worth noting. So I would say the Freestyle Libre is really great for trends, but I wouldn't rely on it for complete accuracy. Okay, I want to talk about the next CGM, which is the Dexcom G7. So with the Dexcom G7, I also got these through Levels. These were a new addition to what's offered. So not every CGM sensor is compatible with the Levels app right now, and so this is a new one they offer. So I received 3 sensors, and each sensor lasts 10 days each. There is a little bit of a grace period, so I have noticed that you get a little bit of extra while it's like warning you to switch CGMs. What's cool about this one is it takes about 30 minutes to calibrate or warm up, and then I find that it's pretty accurate to start. Like there is no like overnight warm-up period, and no, I haven't seen any super wonky readings, I'll say, after that 30 minutes. It doesn't give you any readings until that point. There's a little timer on the Dexcom app, because there's also a manufacturing app for this that you use to get your readings to send over to levels. That's what I use. One of my favorite features in this one is the Bluetooth connectivity. So there is no scanning your arm or your CGM with your phone in the app. It automatically sends the readings to your phone. You never need to scan the sensor. So it's really just more seamless and hands-off. It's constantly measuring, just like any CGM. It's always measuring that. The one thing that is a little bit annoying about the Dexcom G7 is you always have to have the app open. So on the Freestyle Libre, I didn't need to, because I would open it and scan it and then it would still be measuring. So in order to have that continuous flow of data, the app always needs to be open on your phone in the background. So if, out of habit, I just like close all my apps out when I'm done on my phone, and then it sends me this reminder like, oh, make sure you like keep your app open if you want to have data. So that's the only, I guess, thing that's kind of annoying. I guess other things, so the app, like I said, it's an app. There's nothing too special there. I think you can start to track more. Like you can add your fasting glucose and medications and all that, again, geared towards diabetics. I will say there seems to be a lot of alerts. The critical low glucose alarm, and it went off in the middle of the night once. Of course, my husband wasn't thrilled about that, and I didn't know how to turn it off at the time. So I'm just like, all right, turn my phone off. Okay. But there's a lot of different alerts going off, because when you're sleeping, sometimes your levels can get really low. And because the CGM isn't 100% accurate, it could even say it's really low, or maybe you like laid on it funny and then the readings are all wonky. So I have since figured out how to turn all that stuff off. I don't feel like I need any of those notifications. I think for some people they are really helpful and probably life-saving, but for me, I don't need them. So I turned all that off once I figured all that out. The applicator, pretty easy. It's pre-assembled, so there isn't really any messing around like the Freestyle Libre. There's a little, you unscrew the cap, and there's a little like clear part where you like push down until you can't see that part on your arm. And then there's just a little button that you press, and then that's what inserts it. So there's really no, manual labor like on the other one. Just push the button and feel it, and it's in your arm and it's all good to go. The first time I used it, I did kind of mess up a little bit. I don't know. I feel like I was so used to the other one because you really have to push hard. And so I was pushing really hard on this one, and I just totally messed it up. Like the applicator was not on correctly. I had to take it off like right away, and I got sent a new one. Anyways, I think I was just so used to having to put a little force behind it, and this button is really nice. And then the Dexcom G7 readings, like I've sort of said, I feel like they're closer to my glucometer rather than the Freestyle Libre. I haven't used it enough to say that I think it's completely accurate, but it definitely feels like the numbers are within 10 milligrams per deciliter, sometimes a little bit more. I guess it depends, if my glucose is rapidly changing from working out, and I've had a really big spike like this morning I did at the gym from a lot of cardio, when it's like rapidly coming back down after that spike, if I would be checking then, which I'm not right now, I probably wouldn't see a super accurate number, but I would say overall these numbers seem to be pretty good. Just a few things to note about CGMs in general. Maybe you've been wondering. If you have another question, feel free to send me a message and I can help you. But yes, they can get wet, shower, swimming, sweat. The Dexcom recommends not getting the CGM wet for the first 12 hours or so. I think mostly to make sure it stays in place. They do give you, the Dexcom anyways, gives you a little extra sticker that you kind of like put on the outside of the CGM to help it stick. Then you're supposed to like push down on it a little bit. With levels, they also send performance covers, so they're basically like keeping the CGM in place. I will say that with the Freestyle Libre, wearing those Because the CGM lasted for 2 weeks, I did have to change out the performance cover just because it was peeling from just wearing it for so long, sweating, showering, just general wear. With the Dexcom, I haven't had to change it. It only lasts 10 days. So by the time I get to day 10, it still seems pretty good. So that would probably be the only other thing to note. So if you have other questions about CGMs in general, send me a message. I'd be happy to answer those. So here's just a few examples. I'll be probably sharing some more examples from things I've seen in these last few weeks, but some fasting glucose examples. I did an 11-hour fast, took my fasting glucose with the glucometer and it said 83, very normal. My CGM at the same time said 65, so again, it's off pretty significantly there, but I'm not worried about it. It is kind of interesting to see that. Another example, my glucometer said 80 was my fasting glucose, and then the CGM said 77. So there's a little bit of variance there. I think what's making it more accurate, I can't say for sure. Again, CGM is measuring the fluid between the cells. Glucometer is measuring your blood glucose. So there's always going to be a difference. I wouldn't say those are crazy enough differences for me to be concerned. From a snack standpoint, so occasionally I'll check in on post-meal levels. So at its peak, I had a perfect bar. I think it was the dark chocolate chip kind. They're all pretty similar, I would say. So the CGM, at its peak, said I was at around 118 milligrams per deciliter, and the glucometer at the same time said 113. So that was the peak after eating the bar. I don't check this every time, but you'd like to stay within a 30 milligram per deciliter increase from your baseline. Whatever your baseline was, maybe it was your fasting or your pre-meal level. So if you're checking that, you would then hope to not go above a 30 milligram per deciliter increase. And you'd be able to see that continuously on your CGM, or you could take your glucometer and take a pre-meal, and then, it's hard to say. So typically between 2 to 3 hours is when you'd like to see it return to normal. So you could check an hour, sometimes 30 minutes. I would say an hour. If you check around an hour, that would probably be pretty fair to see where you're peaking. Just to wrap up today's episode, I would say both the Freestyle Libre and the Dexcom G7 have their pros and cons, but for me, I would say the Dexcom G7 stands out right now for its convenience, ease of use, and more accurate readings from what I can see now. And that said, remember, no CGM is going to be perfect, no wearable is going to be perfect, it never will be, and it's always a good idea to double check with the glucometer if you're unsure and you're really looking for a reading. I typically like to check my fasting glucose and occasionally post-meal levels, depending upon what it is, just to kind of see. But mostly I'm measuring fasting glucose over time to see the trends. So I really hope you enjoyed this comparison and learned a little something about CGMs and just a little insight onto how I'm using them currently using them. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love for you to subscribe to the show for more tips, insights, and personal stories, and share with someone you think might benefit. Until next time, keep on glowing.